Tuesday, the 23rd of March, 2021. This is a work session of the Portland City Council. It's all about budgets today. Commissioner Ryan will be joining us shortly. He just indicated he's having a little bit of a tech issue, but he'll be with us. And with that, Director Kennard, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, and welcome everybody to, I believe this is our 5th of our budget work sessions. We're focusing today on laying the groundwork for stimulus and recovery. And I will be turning it over to the Director of the Bureau of Environmental Services, Mike Jordan, in a moment to lead our first ever group presentation on our infrastructure bureaus. But before I do, I wanted to notify folks that I think our presentations have been really fantastic. I appreciate all the hard work that our presenters have put in to try to keep things concise and at a high level. It is always a challenge to keep to our time allotments since we don't have a lot of time, but as a reminder, I'm going to be holding up some signs today. When folks are reaching sort of towards the end of their presentations, I have a 5-minute sign, I have a 2-minute sign, I have a 1-minute sign, and then finally time's up. So when you start seeing those signs, just know that your time is nearing its end, and please try to be concise and wrap up so we can make sure.
Can we please give an acknowledgement to Director Kennard for the artistic talent that she put into those time signs? Well, very well done. Congratulations.
They're color coded using my daughter's crayons. So
awesome.
When it starts getting red, you know, it's getting closer to the end. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, with that, I will not take any more of our time. I will turn it over to Director Jordan, and I will be putting our agenda in the chat so folks can follow along.
Well, thank you, Jessica. Is the slide deck going to be, I was assuming it would be loaded and show up. Here it comes. All right. All right. Without further ado, since I don't want to get the hook, Mr. Mayor, members of the Budget Committee, thank you for having us today. I also want to thank Jessica for thinking about this different approach and prompting us with some questions to help guide this presentation. I also want to thank, obviously, the directors. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves as they come up in the panel sequence. I want to thank their staff for contributing to this, and I especially want to thank Farshad Al-Adadi and Karen Martinek for herding us all up and getting this one presentation together. Almost unprecedented, I think, for 5 or 6 bureaus to write on one presentation. So our goal today in this first 30 minutes is to talk a little bit about infrastructure investment, how we do our work, and how it might help to stimulate and perhaps even make more equitable our economic recovery. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the layout, the run of show, if you will. I'm going to talk about these topics. I'm going to go through them. I'll let you look at them. They're going to come up through the presentation. I do want to draw your attention, however, to the picture on the upper part of this slide. That's Southeast Hawthorne last summer. And we had, with the council's help, the opportunity to quickly pivot off of another job and do a main replacement on Southeast Hawthorne in a matter of weeks. And it was originally scheduled to be done in a matter of months. And obviously that was because much of Hawthorne was shut down anyway due to COVID. And council collaborated with us to pivot quickly and get a really major piece of infrastructure work done. That is the kind of thing you're going to hear about, is how we're making adjustments in both the COVID era and setting up hopefully for the post-COVID era through infrastructure investment. Next slide, please. So all of our infrastructure investments are economic development. Council made a very wise, conscious decision very early in COVID to continue our capital programs. And they have made a huge difference in the contractor economy in the city. We literally have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in the last 12 months which has provided immediate jobs, obviously. And then, of course, we would argue lays the groundwork for a livable, sustainable economy in the post-COVID era. Another thing that we are attempting to do more often than perhaps we did in the past, and that is to take some of our capital program that can immediately be put out on the street in smaller chunks, more immediate projects that we could expedite into the field. Next slide, please. And that intentionality has always been there in the capital programs, but mostly it had been geared toward service reliability, about doing capital maintenance, about doing capital improvements that allowed us to make sure that Portlanders got reliable service no matter what the piece of infrastructure was or service was. But our focus is changing. COVID has brought us into thinking about our work differently. And you're going to hear about some of those equity-oriented, particular community-oriented focus that have been developing in the intentionality of our infrastructure programs. Next slide, please. And then this is my last slide. I just wanted to mention Price Waterhouse has estimated that 10 jobs for every $1 million in infrastructure investment are created. Those are both short-term jobs and long-term jobs. And as I mentioned earlier, we are also thinking about our capital programs in ways to package them, either working with prime contractors to make sure that the subcontractors are getting work in chunks that they can do, or breaking our jobs up into ways that a variety of different contractors can work on those jobs and be successful. With that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Gabe.
Thanks so much, Mike. And we can go to the next slide. Well, good morning, everyone. I am Gabrielle Salmer. I'm the director of the Portland Water Bureau, and thank you for the opportunity to join you today. And I will also extend my thanks to CBO Director Kennard. This is a new budget experience for all of us. And I know I speak for this panel and probably all of us that we would really love to get your feedback on whether this is the right level of information and organization, and how we can and learn. This is really exciting to work all together on this. I am glad to speak briefly about how infrastructure spending is one area of the city's budget that can really make a big difference in our commitment to equity. So this is really where I think we can turn our values and our priorities into a real impact for the city. And you might already know and be justifiably proud of Parks investment in vulnerable communities. You can see the stat on this slide. And the same can also be said of PBOT, where approximately a third, 34% of their capital construction dollars is for projects in East Portland. And so it's this consideration of equity and where to site projects and dealing with the balance of improvements and gentrification and need investment. All of these are issues we confront with our projects. And we know that there are barriers to accessing the benefits of infrastructure, and we're investing in how to look at obstacles. So just one example is BDS's program to support BIPOC small businesses. And really this is about tailoring our work in BIPOC communities by lifting the level of support for navigating the permitting system. And we'll continue to focus on BIPOC communities as we expand and develop new programs, just like we did at Water and BES last year with our SPUR program that reached 500 businesses, 87% of which were BIPOC or women-owned. And next slide, please. Thanks. And the infrastructure bureaus here today have been leaders in using city and state tools to collaborate, I would say, with our procurement partners at the city to build equity into our large contracts. So when the city first introduced the concept of community benefit agreements, several of the infrastructure projects were the first, among the first to be piloted. And that is 1% of the construction cost on public improvement contracts for the COAP, which is the Community Opportunities and Enhancement Program. And those funds are dedicated to the support of greater equity in public contracting for COVID certified firms. And that's with technical assistance and workforce development. And, you know, I'm particularly proud of Washington Park and our reservoir improvements being used to pilot the COEP. That program is administered through Prosper Portland, which just again shows how connected we all are in pursuing these objectives. And I would also say, I know that there's more work to do, particularly in understanding and disaggregating who's benefiting from these programs. I really believe we need to have a growth mindset as we approach this work, to be innovative and to be willing to evolve when we don't hit the mark. But it's also important to acknowledge our successes. You know, like nearly half of the construction contract dollars in the 2014 Parks Bond going to COVID certified firms. And there's also a lot to look forward to. So we're in the process of validating the COEP, and that will allow us to increase our own workforce diversity. There's a court action now to validate the city's framework, and that outlines how ratepayer funds particularly can be used to train and support socially disadvantaged both individuals and businesses so that they can work on Water Bureau and BES construction projects. And that training and the support programs that are associated will not only provide individuals and businesses to work on our construction projects, but also I think really provide the essential skills that are transferable to construction projects and services at the city and beyond. We move forward on that in mid-July at the court for that validation process. And then another thing to look forward to, I think, is, you know, looking at last year how we brought the Broadway Corridor Community Benefits Agreement. And again, I just want to acknowledge, by combining all aspects of that project, we were able to make the most of the CBA program and including water and sewer under that umbrella. So I guess I'll just finish up by saying that by putting the construction dollars into the neighborhoods and the small businesses that really support the city, I think that is committing our action, our words and our deeds to the charge of the city. And the city in 2017 passed some of these ordinances. You know, there was a part of that resolution that read that we're doing this not to not indirectly or passively perpetuate discrimination against historical under-inclusion of minorities, women, and low-income people in the construction industry. So I think that is what we are striving for, and that's what we are achieving with these programs. And I think I will turn it over to Director Esau.
Thank you, Gabe. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca Esau. I'm the Director of the Bureau of Development Services. When you think about development and permitting, you may think of large commercial developers, but they're just a subset of the customers that we work with. We review and issue permits for small businesses, electrical and plumbing work for homes and businesses, sign permits, mural permits, permits for food carts, affordable housing projects, remodels and additions, projects for hospitals, schools, universities, and so much more all across the community. We and our partner bureaus are on the front lines working with community members, trying to help them understand the regulations that apply to their property and their projects. And we also interact with neighbors of these projects who may have questions or concern, and we consider all of them to be our customers. When people think about building permits, they often think the Bureau of Development Services, but there are 6 other bureaus who are also administering their own regulations related to their respective missions and review permit applications alongside us. BDS plays a coordinating role with its partner bureaus, BES, PBOT, Water Bureau, Parks and Rec, Fire and Rescue, and the Housing Bureau. Across these 7 bureaus, there are a total of about 18 review groups, each reviewing permit applications for their own requirements, such as water quality backflow, stormwater requirements, street tree requirements, zoning requirements, fire and life safety, and structural requirements. The nature of the proposal determines which review groups need to review the permit application. So these Assignments are all tailored depending on the permit. Each site and proposed project is a unique puzzle, and collectively the review groups are working with the applicant to make all of the applicable requirements work together on each site. Permitting on private property requires inter-bureau coordination, not only for the permits on private property, but for the required improvements in the public right-of-way or the public works permits. In some cases, the right-of-way needs to be widened, or trees need to be planted, or a sidewalk installed, or other requirements. Prior to city offices closing due to COVID, the permit center was the place customers needed to come to apply for a permit, pay for a permit, or get information about their property or project they wanted to do, or obtain historic permit records. We're in the process of creating multiple ways to access these services with the goal of removing barriers to access. For some people, taking time off work or finding childcare and transportation to get downtown was a barrier. For others, if we shifted to only offering online services, this would present a barrier for them. So we need to create multiple paths so people can choose what will work for them. For example, at this time, most customers are submitting their building permit applications through our new expanded online portal and uploading their digital plans. But customers have the option to submit paper plans and can arrange the drop-off of those by appointment. There's still a lot of work to be done and a lot of improvements underway, both in how we better reach and serve BIPOC community members, as well as converting and expanding all of our office-based, paper-based in-person services to also offer efficient online services to the community. It's a massive undertaking, but critical because of our commitment to equity and our essential role in supporting economic recovery. We have to find ways to work more efficiently, make our services more easily accessible, and have the processes and staffing capacity in place to deliver more timely services. You'll see an audit that's been released from the auditor's office today that confirms everything I'm telling you now. On that note, Commissioner Ryan is convening a task force to take on the longstanding systemic challenges with permitting and coordinating the citywide function across 7 bureaus. The goal is to significantly reduce the overall time it takes from permit application to permit issuance. Those of us who have been here for any length of time have seen multiple attempts to improve permitting, and we are committed to getting it done this time. Portland's economic survival and recovery is dependent on having an efficient, streamlined, predictable permitting system. This supports jobs in the community, expands the housing supply, attracts investment, and facilitates the continued maintenance of buildings across Portland, all of which increase property tax revenue and business license tax revenue, which in turn feed the city's general fund. To support this work, the technology projects, the process improvements, and the staffing capacity in the short term through this downturn are an investment in a healthy general fund for years to come. Thank you. And next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to Chris.
Good morning. Trying to unmute myself. Okay. Are we on the correct slide? Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm Chris Warner. I'm the director of the Portland Bureau of Transportation. I'm going to talk a little bit about accessibility investments and how that's a shared priority by all of the directors here. The cost of building an accessible city is significant. Just installing all of the ADA compliant curb ramps will cost the city more than $500 million. But this is a responsibility we all share. Being able to get from place to place easily and safely is something that every Portlander needs and deserves. Without safe access and easy mobility, people can get to their jobs or to the store. They can enjoy the culture, parks, and other amenities that make living in Portland special. They can go into public buildings to exercise their rights as constituents. They can, in other words, be full members of our community. Fulfilling our responsibility to them is a central part of the commitment we have made to creating an equitable Portland. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to touch a little bit on the American Rescue Plan and some of the opportunities that Mike kind of outlined that I'd also like to touch on. First of all, COVID-19 has been and is a public health emergency, but it's also caused a financial emergency for many public agencies. Multiple city bureaus saw steep drops in revenue because of the economic recession that the pandemic caused. The drop in revenues has made our basic maintenance a challenge, and it's made it at much greater of a challenge than we've experienced before. Before the pandemic, the city's maintenance was one of the most stubborn problems that we face. It's also one of the most expensive. The annual price tag to maintain our assets is over $708 million, and that's an annual price tag for all of the bureaus. The drop in revenue we've experienced has only made it harder to address the challenges of delivering reliable, well-maintained assets to our fellow Portlanders. Next slide. Now, with the American Rescue Plan, we have a golden opportunity to make real progress in closing this maintenance gap. Maintenance and repair projects tend to be straightforward and shovel-ready. This means we can deliver quick results in highly visible problems, demonstrating to Portlanders that their local government is working and working quickly for them. Just as importantly, investing in maintenance now saves money later. It is much cheaper to pave a street that has a handful of potholes than to wait to have to rebuild the entire street from the bottom up because we neglected it far beyond what a normal repair would take. Given the potential to save public money, spending is often termed a no regrets investment. If we don't invest today, not only will we pay more in the future, but Portlanders will be burdened with less reliable essential services like sewer and water, faced with difficulty accessing important neighborhood resources like community centers and parks restrooms, and forced to navigate bumpier roads. Finally, maintenance projects are job generators. As noted earlier, for every $1 million in repair, we can create 10 jobs. And these aren't just any jobs, they're good jobs. They pay a family wage. It's also possible to structure this work so that companies of various sizes, including DMW, ESB, and SDVBE firms, can compete for and do the work. A city that works literally for all Portlanders, investments that save tens of millions of dollars in future costs, and creating high-paid, stable jobs. These are the obvious benefits to using American Rescue Plan dollars to rescue our city from its failing infrastructure and to deliver public assets for Portlanders. And these are the assets the Portlanders expect and deserve. I think I will turn it over to Adina Long from the Parks Bureau.
Thank you, Chris. Can we advance the slide deck, please? Wonderful. Thank you. Good morning, City Council. I'm Adina Long, Director of Portland Parks and Recreation. Thank you for the opportunity to hear from me and my colleagues this morning. One of the collective primary goals of all of the infrastructure bureaus is to create healthy, livable, and complete communities. Studies show that financial investments in infrastructure make significant contributions to the economy. For example, a recent U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis report found that outdoor recreation contributes over $450 billion to the U.S. economy, which is over 2% of the gross domestic product. 1 year into the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that infrastructure like parks and recreation play a vital role in ensuring that all people thrive, no matter their race, ethnicity, income, age, location, or gender identity. The pandemic once again illuminated how much the public relies on the city's developed parks, open spaces, natural areas, water access, streets and rights of way, and other destinations in Portland. Portland Parks and Recreation strives to improve the quality of our neighbors' lives as we address health and wellness through active and currently virtual recreation, healthy meals, connection to nature, tree canopy expansion, youth development, lifetime learning, and of course, play. The pandemic, public health guidance, and resultant economic impacts has encouraged us all to reimagine the public realm. For example, the Transportation Bureau's use of the right-of-way for expanded outdoor neighborhood recreation and dining opportunities helped to support healthy, livable, and connected communities over the last year. Next slide. The city's 2035 comprehensive plan provides a guiding framework for the city to develop healthy, complete communities. Together, the infrastructure bureaus facilitate a healthy Portland by protecting our environment, by investing in improvements to environmental quality, by protecting and planting trees to green the city, by advancing the city's climate action plan, by introducing energy conservation techniques, by implementing stormwater and wastewater treatments, and by installing clean water facilities. In addition to providing environmental protection services to our communities, infrastructure bureaus also provide employment opportunities to Portlanders and offer living wage jobs. For example, thanks to the park's local option levy, Portland Parks and Recreation will be hiring 50 new FTEs and 1,850 seasonal employees just this year. Additionally, infrastructure bureaus implement capital projects that utilize disadvantaged, minority-owned, women-owned, emerging small businesses, service-disabled veterans, business enterprises, contractors, and subcontractors, thus providing opportunities for minority businesses in the design and construction industry to grow and prosper. As an example of a recent success in achieving that equity goal, the 2014 Parks Replacement Bond Program has exceeded the citywide 20% goal by utilizing 42% DMW, ESB, SDV, BE consultants and contractors in bond-funded project implementation. We also create infrastructure facilities in a manner that supports our BIPOC, refugee, and immigrant communities. Portland Parks and Recreation is on a trajectory to build out an equitable park system that provides equal access to all Portland residents. Lewitt View Park, Gateway Discovery Park, Gateway Green Park, Leach Garden, and upcoming Park Lane and Mill Park are examples of park projects that help eliminate park deficiencies in East Portland and make the city where we live, work, and play more prosperous, healthy, and livable. We, the infrastructure bureaus of BES, Portland Parks and Recreation, Water, PBOT, BDS, and OMF are working together to make Portland more prosperous. To accomplish this, infrastructure bureaus need to continue with investments via infrastructure-focused economic recovery funding that will contribute to enhancing community prosperity, reverse the downward trends of our assets condition, address climate change issues, and sustain services and programs that meet the needs of our growing, diverse community, thus creating healthy, livable, and complete communities. Thank you. I guess I'm turning it back to Director Kennard.
I just want to jump in for a sec. I just want to make sure, does anybody have any questions before we move on?
So we have 30 minutes for question and discussion. So you're right, Nate.
Great.
We have plenty of time.
Great, thank you. It looks like Andrea has a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's a piece where you'll talk a little bit more about how we're going to ensure that a truly diverse workforce can benefit from these new jobs that these investments will allow us to create, and what the city will be doing to ensure that.
Well, maybe I'll start, and Gabe mentioned some of this, so she should jump in. I can tell you that we're working both with Prosper Portland and some of the CBOs that and unions that bring new folks into the industry, both in internships and as journeymen on many of our projects. I'll just speak to the secondary treatment expansion program at the Columbia Boulevard waste treatment plant. We are currently hitting numbers in the first phases of that construction for minorities and women being brought into the workforce, particularly with minorities. We're doing very well in the 30% range of workers on these jobs. And we're just getting started. The really big work comes in 2 to 3 years out there. So we're really encouraged and working with the unions and CBOs to diversify the workforce. It's not an easy thing to do, and the Portland market is shifting, the labor market, and we're continuing to find new ways to get people into those jobs. And it's literally only, as Gabe mentioned, in the last couple of years that we've moved from trying very hard to expand the minority and women-owned business vendor market, if you will, to now shifting and focusing on workforce also. So, and I'd invite any of fellow panelists to jump in.
If I could just suggest to, I think there's been kind of a history of many of our trades occupations not being able to recruit and retain women, in part because of the type of work, hours of work, and the challenges in securing and keeping childcare. And obviously childcare as an industry and sector is in real crisis post-pandemic, during pandemic. And I just wonder if there are any thoughts about potentially trying to set aside some of the rescue plan dollars to help folks afford and find childcare if they're working in these essential jobs that we're creating with other parts of these investments, or other similar kind of wraparound strategies that go beyond just sort of recruitment benchmarks.
Great. Frida and then Commissioner Hardesty.
Before I ask, I have quite a few questions, but are we going to be just discussing, because I want to ask the right questions?
Following this presentation, we are going to have a presentation.
I'm losing you.
Yeah, Jessica, I think we're having troubles hearing you. Can you try turning off your video for a second, see if that helps?
Now?
Okay, start talking and I'll let you know.
I'll put my comment in the chat.
You're good. Okay, now you sound good. So when your video's off, I think you have enough bandwidth.
Each presenter from today will have their own time to present on their budget as well. So Frida, for your questions, if it's targeted really at sort of this group presentation, if it's detailed about each bureau, we will have more time for that later as well.
Okay, that's fine. I wanted to ask the right questions. I'm kind of following up on Andrea's question in regard to the contracting of minorities. Having been subcontractor to the larger companies on projects when I worked, is often they would sign us up because of our expertise to check off a box, and also because we're a small business. Is there any auditing done after the fact to make sure those utilizing the subcontractors of our minority and women-owned businesses are actually using them to the extent they say they're going to? It seems to be, it was an issue when I worked in the field I worked in. And so it's nice, the big companies tend to check off boxes, but not necessarily utilize them when the actual work is done.
This is Chris from PBOT. I can address that a little bit. I know historically what has happened on transportation projects is like flaggers, right? That was always the key. They would use flaggers as trying to get to their thing. So we've worked very hard to work with Awami and NAMCO and others in terms of trying to create the kind of businesses that can have more the high paying and the high skilled work. And so we have somebody on our staff that does basically her work is doing trying to find contractors and work on contracting issues to make sure that our numbers are where they need to be. It's as Commissioner Hardesty knows, we struggle sometimes with some of the federal contracts, the federal aid contracts, in terms of the hard goals that they have, as opposed to the goals that we can put on our own our own city money, as opposed to once the federal money comes in, it kind of locks you into into a particular hard goal based on a disparity study and whether or not we have one as a region. So yeah, so we that's something we're very cognizant of, is trying to make sure that it is the more high paying professions and not just flaggers. That's in the transportation world, that's always been the thing. They just hire flaggers, right, to try to get up to their totals. So we try to encourage more of the other skills as well.
I just recommend some kind of quick audit on that with actual paying out to those contractors to make sure they're really doing what they say they're doing. And most questions relate to budgetary items, so I'll wait on those.
Good morning. Thank you all for that presentation. I want to pick up on the theme that Andrea and Frida talked about. And this is like not news to anybody that does contracts, is that we only utilize, we get white majority contractors get extra points by checking a box that says they're using minority or women or white emerging companies. Every audit that we've had shows that people of color do not benefit from city contracts across the board. And because we only rely on the state system that certifies less than 20% of the businesses in the state that have the ability to do it, we really limit our opportunities to do to walk our talk. And I see it just about across the board in every contract. So if we're going to work with the same union partners, if we're going to work with the same white majority contractors, how would I expect the outcomes to be any different based on 20 years of audits that show that we in fact aren't even close to meeting our goal? I think I like the idea of some of the innovation that I'm hearing, but we have way too many contracts that we pass at City Council where Black people are still the flaggers. And these are people that get contracts over and over and over again from the city. If we're going to emerge differently from this pandemic, our approach has to be radically different. And unfortunately, what I've heard today is kind of, we're going to keep working with our partners, but I haven't heard the innovation that will be necessary to change the outcomes. And so I don't guess I really have a question, except I would encourage each bureau to collectively be as creative as possible, because even though the rules are the rules, if we were creative, we'd have much better outcomes. And it is disappointing to month after month after month see our good faith effort go for naught, and for us not changing the outcomes of who benefits from enormous investments of public dollars. And so I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. We've struggled with this for the whole 2 years, 2 months I've been here. But what I hope to come out of this process is something innovative, something new, because guess what? If we fail at something new, we failed, but at least we tried something different, expecting different outcomes. So I want to encourage you to be as creative as possible and not think that you have to operate in a box, because we have to help minority and women businesses survive just like the major white contractors. And we have not ever intentionally, with 14 programs, made a dent. 14 programs that are supposed to benefit minority and women, and we continue to fail as a city. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Ryan, then Andrea Peluso.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, everyone. I appreciated the chat that the Director Kennard just put in, and reminding us that we'll have a chance to dive into budget dialogue later. I also appreciate the conversations that are currently taking place, and I'll just briefly mention something on that and then move to my question around infrastructure permitting and development, which I think the conversation we're currently having is fundamental and foundational on that as well. I just hope that this council always is an advocate for upstream on equity. Frida understands this real well, that the school's demographics are definitely different than the entire population. That's where you start to see at least minority, majority population. And that's where we also have our biggest opportunities to continue to promote the trades in our schools, which unfortunately the education system stigmatized students going into the trades for actually the last few decades. So that's a universal problem. So I just had to say that on my soapbox since I come from that world over the last 15 years. The term infrastructure permitting development is the title. And so I'm kind of impressed that all of you are presenting together. And as a newer commissioner, I actually have a very open question. How often does this composite of directors, which I really didn't ever consider you all meeting together. So how often do you meet as a system amongst yourselves? And I don't think you just did this to put on a lovely work session for us today. So is this a consistent meeting that you have amongst yourselves? And anyone can answer it. It's just out there for the world. There you go.
Well, I'll jump in quickly and let my colleagues also comment. Sometimes, Commissioner, it seems like that's all I do is go to director meetings. So we have the planning and development directors meet regularly. Rebecca convenes the directors that are part of the development permitting process regularly. We have Tom Reinhardt convenes all directors for different issues. And then we come together. We're on a regular call as public works directors, transportation and the utilities and parks regularly. Every other week we're on a call together. So we do meet quite a bit together, Commissioner.
Okay. Thank you, Director Jordan. Clearly, I have an opinion around permitting. I think a lot of Portlanders do. And according to audits that go back to when the earth was cooling, or at least back into the late 70s, we've had a problem with this area of actually being even close to at peer with the marketplace in terms of the duration of time it takes to permit for our customers who are small businesses, who are low-income housing providers, and our residents, and of course also some of our bigger projects with developers. And so I'm delighted to head up that effort to really get to the bottom of this. And I appreciate you all in advance for your willingness to finally make some headway on something that has been plaguing our city for decades. And at a time when our reputation isn't as trendy, if you will, as it was, now is a time for us to really behave and act differently and show different results with real innovation. So I just had to do that little commercial for the upcoming task force that's taking place. And again, thank you for having your deputies as well as your line professionals involved in that. What would you say, in addition to permitting, is the #1 issue that comes up that's just makes your head hurt as a team, and that you think we should be focused on in addition to improving the duration time that's been plaguing our city around permits? What's another one that you would say is a top of mind issue that's tough on our city?
I think I can start. This is Chris Warner from PBOT. One of the things, and it deals with permitting, is try to make sure that all of the policies and the work we're doing actually are consistent internally. So we are doing kind of a deep dive in terms of policy and whether they line up with either charter or administrative rules. So we're just trying to see what the universe is so we can get our arms around that, because I think over the years, as you said, City Hall makes policy or they change things, and whether or not it's internally consistent with the work we're doing and whether it actually is inconsistent with what other bureaus are doing. That's the kind of the deep dive that we are starting to address in our bureau.
Just to follow up on that this is Gabe Salmer at Water. I would just kudos to PBOT and to Chris for Complete Streets 2035. That process is another area where we're talking about all of these issues, because all of the policies that councils over the decades have created are smart, important things that the city needs. They can be in conflict with each other. And so if we don't do this in sort of a global fashion, we end up doing a lot of one-off fixes. And that is, I think, intolerable for the development community that needs certainty and clarity. It also wastes staff resources and thus, our ratepayer and taxpayer funds. So I think that we have a good goal in that Complete Streets process to really focus at least on the right-of-way issues. I think we are getting a handle on that, but yes, that is something that keeps me up at night.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Warners and Solmer. I don't want to take up too much time, but I like this open dialogue that we're having. And I think I'll just leave with this. I'm experiencing some of what you're speaking of as well. I like the language you use where the policies, well-intentioned, can start to, can start to be in conflict with one another. I hope that you all as a group talk about what those are and bring those to us, because really when you're doing system change work, the hardest thing to do and the most necessary thing to do at the beginning is to weed out the clutter and to look at where they are conflicting with one another so that you can actually be a streamlined team that's working together and you're not experiencing what we could say feels like silos so you can survive, or that you just call out that they're conflicting with one another, but you don't feel empowered to change it. I would disagree. You guys are professionals that are in the trenches and you have that insight. So we as electeds always want to hear that and have it bubble up. And so I just want to take this time to say that. Thank you all for showing me how you work together across Bureau as a team. It's very refreshing.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Next up is Andrea and then Kofi.
Yeah, I'm going back to the little bit of the previous conversation to just say explicitly, right, that like all the data shows that it's been really a lot more women that have lost jobs during COVID and been forced out of the workforce because of caregiving responsibilities. And I don't know if we're going to talk about this at another part in the agenda. I know this is kind of the setup for recovery and infrastructure building. And I just want to have said explicitly that if we don't intentionally invest in the kinds of infrastructure around jobs that make it possible for women to come back to work, we're going to see recovery dollars just pass them by and a potential hiring boom they can't participate in. And I think this set of plans, while good, is really subsidizing what we already know to be very male-dominated jobs. And I just worry about the way that we're potentially perpetuating inequities, particularly just to have said too, it really is Black and Latinx women who have lost the majority of jobs and are kind of not even counted anymore as unemployed because they can't be looking for work. So there's some underlying issues to address to make sure that these dollars are more equitably spent. I mean, we saw childcare providers who were, when I think we saw this in most fields around some of the business loans, that there were a lot of people of color who couldn't access some of the kind of grants and various other loans and things like that because of, other systemic barriers and ongoing systemic racism. So I just wonder how we're addressing this with this, knowing that the federal government is currently considering another infrastructure package. So we're going to have more dollars to spend over time, I would assume, on more shovel-ready projects. So I just want to make sure as we're spending that it's truly reaching the whole community in a fair way. And also that we're being broad in our thinking about what infrastructure is. Infrastructure doesn't just need to mean buildings and construction projects. It can also mean a childcare infrastructure. Or that includes an adequate workforce and facilities. We could be spending grant dollars to ensure that providers can expand their facilities, can, make improvements to their facilities that allow them to serve more kids. I mean, so they're in addition to kind of workforce expansions that allow us to have some services that are also necessary infrastructure. So I just want to have said that. I'm not sure if now is exactly the right moment, but I hope that we can be creative in our thinking about our approach with these dollars.
Kofi, then Frida.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council, and thank you, directors, for your presentations. Markisha is out this week, so she asked me to represent the Office of Equity and Human Rights. My name is Kofi Desu. I want to echo what commissioners and community members have said about this joint presentation. I've been with the city for over 13 years, and I feel more hopeful today than ever before from equity perspective. And also with the spirit of one city, this joint presentation is giving me more hope because we have struggled in these equity initiatives because of the silos that has existed in the city of Portland. I want also to say that this is the city council that I have seen that is really deep into equity. And I can see that, through, everything that the bureaus are doing because of the way that the council members are, directing and also holding the bureaus accountable for equity. One thing I want to recommend, if it's not done yet, is to look at the legal framework for contracting. The federal laws, the state laws, and the city laws that regulate contracting, and assess them and see where there are barriers for the initiatives that the bureau directors are taking, so that the city council, using their power, can maybe start lobbying the states or doing something. It's been over 13 years now, and I think if we start somewhere, I believe in the city of Portland for bringing change to the region and even to the nation. So, but looking at the laws that are barriers to our equity initiatives, I think will take us further in our equity initiatives. So thank you again for everything we are doing.
Thank you, Kofi. Frida?
I've got my video off. I'm having some trouble with the connection here. I'm in Denver. So I had a follow-up question. I live off a division where there's a lot of work being done. There's ADA sidewalks, there's sidewalks infill, there's the rapid transit production, there's affordable housing being built. And one of the complaints I get is they work on something and seems finished, then they tear it up again and, and they're back again. And I can tell you, going down division between the freeway and 135th is a challenge at times. But I guess I'm questioning how much coordination is being done to avoid what appears to be they move away barriers because they finish something, then they're back in the same place again, doing some more work. And instead of trying to coordinate a little more so it's all done together or one after the other, so that that area is only cut down for a short, for one time. Anyone?
I think
Sorry about that. I was trying to get off mute. Yeah, we are actively working on a new construction coordination tool. Part of what we call our Get Portland Moving online mapping tool will launch in May or early summer. We lead meetings monthly with public agencies and private utilities to discuss upcoming work. Certainly, division. I know there's a lot going on division as you referenced, but yeah, that's something I think Gabe referred to, the Streets 2035, which is another way of us coordinating right-of-way work. So there's more to come. We've been working on this for a number of years. I think sometimes it's a software solution. I mean, other times you'll hear with, particularly with water, if there's breaks or other issues. But yeah, we know it's frustrating. We know it's not great to have multiple cuts in the road. So yeah, we're doing a lot of work as we can to try to coordinate all the needs, not only of the city bureaus, but there's also a lot of private utilities that do work in the right of way as well.
Thank you. I have one follow-up on Commissioner Ryan's mention of education. Is over the few years I've been here, I've been promoting accessing the diverse students in David Douglas. And there's a lot of money going into CTE. Of course, COVID has put a halt to a lot of our expansion of our programs in the technical fields, including construction. But I would like to recommend, I'm not hearing that they actually connect well other than parks. And I'm more than willing as a school board member there to help facilitate those interactions so they can expand. If you want minority communities getting trained, the school districts are more than willing to work with city and other agencies to try to expand those opportunities for students. And we are a minority white population in David Douglas now. So we do have those the diversity that you're looking for, and it would really help the students with internships, et cetera, getting go on. And we have a very broad range of CTE programs because of our high school has almost 3,000 students. So we have broad programs. Just FYI, I'm here to help any agency, any bureau, if they're needing contact and to help facilitate that contact with our high school. Board members have a lot of clout, so we can actually get meetings a lot easier than you guys can.
This is Gabe Solmer, and I just want to absolutely grab onto that idea. I'll contact you after this meeting to set something up. We have run into some of the barriers that you mentioned. Water has tried to get some of these internships going because we do realize that that is a way to kind of grow our own people who are committed to Portland, who have grown up here and who can join our ranks. And we know we need to start early. And we've made some attempts, and I would love to connect with someone who has those interconnections and can help get us to the right place. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, we have a new principal at our high school who is African American and has been very involved in the school since he started there as an automotive teacher. So I know this is a focus of his, is getting our students into good paying jobs. So I'll be happy to help in any way.
Kofi, is your hand still raised from last time, or do you have a new question?
Sorry, it's for the last time.
No worries. All right, Director Kennard, that looks like it's it for now.
So I think the schedule for today, we're actually going to take an early break. It is a 3-hour session today. So we're going to go ahead and break now. And then we'll reconvene at 10:10 and start with our budget presentations. And the first budget presentation will be a joint presentation with the Bureau of Environmental Services and the Water Bureau.
All right, then we'll take a recess till 10:10. We'll see you all in about 12 minutes. Good to go. So with that, Director Sulmer and Director Jordan, you're up next.
Okay, I think we've got a slide deck that should be coming up here momentarily. Again, for the record, I'm Mike Jordan. I am the Director of the Bureau of Environmental Services, and I'm with Gabe Sulmer today. And we're gonna do a first ever joint presentation by the utilities. And Gabe, did you have anything opening?
Just wanted to say again, thank you to the Budget Office for helping us think through this. And I guess this is a silver lining of the pandemic, is that we are being innovative and we are thinking of different ways to do this. So again, we would love your feedback, particularly from council, but from all of our partners, as to whether we're hitting the mark in terms of, is this information helpful to you as you go into your deliberations?
Absolutely. Could we get the first slide, please? So I'm going to lead off here and talk just a little bit about the Bureau of Environmental Services mission. Those words look fairly simple and straightforward, but it's been quite a shift for us in the last few years. We were, for years and years, a pretty straightforward kind of sewer utility. And we now realize through our newest strategic plan and a lot of our work that our job really is the protection of all the watersheds, the 5 watersheds in the city of Portland, and everything we do is geared toward that. This year's budget is a little different for us. We've been on a pretty big growth curve over the last 4 or 5 years. And this year, because of COVID, because of lost revenues and a number of challenges, we are proposing a current service level budget. So maintaining current service levels, we're not asking for any new FTE. And you can see, and we'll talk a little later about how heavily our budget and operation is toward operating, maintaining $15 billion worth of infrastructure. So that's our approach, obviously still trying to make progress on equity goals in our plan, but really trying to maintain our fiscal and financial sustainability through COVID. Gabe, next slide, please.
Thanks so much. And very similar to Director Jordan, we are a public health agency. We both are. And so we are focused on resilience and reliability and balancing that with affordability. So you'll hear a lot about that in this presentation. How do we do all of that in the current environment? As a relatively new director, I just wanted to share my priorities. And I have been very thankful to work with Commissioner Mapps as the commissioner in charge. I think we share these priorities of equity, sustainability, and strategic planning. I think these are all really, really important as we go into just an environment where innovation and out-of-the-box thinking is going to be really important, so we can come out of the pandemic stronger than before. And next slide. So I'll start here, and former Commissioner Fritz would be outraged at all of these acronyms. But really the point of this graphic is just to emphasize at the outset that we are both highly regulated. Federal, state, and local regulations drive our operations and much of what we do. And as you may know, regulations generally don't get less strict and they generally don't get less expensive. We know more these days about how to protect our water, and we have technology to do more to protect our water. And so our budgets really do reflect that. And, I think it just, again, makes sense to emphasize the ongoing regulatory reporting and monitoring that we do to keep our consumer confidence high in our systems. And that really does drive a lot of what our budgets go to.
And I'll just tag on and say there's no question about it. And I agree, Commissioner Fritz would be abhorred by this. But all of you need to know that that bowl of soup has got to be a lot bigger to handle all the acronyms and all the regulatory agencies that we work with. BES, for instance, just got 2 new permits, renewed permits this year, one for our waste discharge at Columbia Boulevard and one for our surface water management. Both of those new permits have brand new expensive requirements in them. And so we will be adjusting to those over the next few years. So Gabe's comment about this is a world that never stands still for us is absolutely true. Next slide. So this is the budget in brief of both bureaus, the first time ever presented together. You can see at the top of the slide that we're right just over $1 billion between us. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see the split between BES and the Water Bureau. But even though we are different bureaus, different overall budgets, the configuration of our budget is very similar. You can see in the pie chart that debt service for both bureaus combined is about $233 million for next year. That really represents capital investment that we've made in the past. That's what that is really about. You can see the capital improvement slice that's about $384 million. That combined between the two bureaus is the current capital investment that we intend to make this fiscal year. And then it doesn't really show in that smallest slice of the pie, but the money that goes to the rate stabilization fund is really about future capital, about money that we're putting away for capital investments in the future. So on this particular slide, the capital and debt represent a little over 60% of the total. I can tell you for BES, the number for capital is right at 2/3. So we are capital-driven kinds of operations. There's no question about it. And you saw a little bit of that in the earlier presentation before the break, how much we are involved in investing in capital in the city. Next slide, please.
Thanks. I'll start this one, and again, just to mention that all of this infrastructure work is designed to make our system work now and into the future. We have an estimated value, again, combined, $30 billion, over $30 billion. So these investments are really important to keep this picture looking good. I'm proud to say that over 80% of our combined infrastructure are in those very good, and fair condition categories. That is wonderful. I think that should make everyone very happy, but it does mean that we have to continue that hard work and an investment to maintain our systems for future generations. We've got just about $2.8 billion for both bureaus combined in the poor and very poor categories. So that is a target for our asset management program. I think both bureaus have been working really hard. I just want to call out how we identify our assets to replace and how we have included equity and an equity lens as a criteria and consideration in that process. That has not always happened. So I think, again, it's important to call out where we are doing better. When we know better, we do better. And so that has been added as a consideration. And Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about that unknown piece?
Yeah, thank you, Gabe. I will tag on about the worrisome bar at the right side of the chart. That is totally BES assets. We have some asset classes where we are just working our way through identification and condition assessment of those assets. A bunch of those are natural assets, drainage ways, stream corridors, wetlands that are either being identified or being classified as to their health and their ability to act as stormwater retention and conveyance systems. The other parts of that are mostly our pump stations and our force mains. Force mains are our BES's version of what water does everywhere. Their pipes are all pressurized. Our pipes are normally gravity pipes. However, we've got about 40 miles of in our system that is pressurized, and we can't run a camera down those pipes like we can the others. And so we struggle a little bit to know the condition of those pipes. And the stuff we run through our pipes is a little more corrosive than what runs through Water Bureau's pipes. And so occasionally, because of the unknown nature of the condition and some of the age of those pipes, particularly those pressurized ones, we have some failures, and we really need to get our heads around that category of our assets. So with that, next slide. We've talked about this probably maybe too much so far this morning, but we're infrastructure bureau. A big part of our work is investing in maintaining and improving the level of service of all of our systems. And you can see at the bottom of this slide, over the 5 years, combined water and BES will spend over $2 billion in our capital programs. And that just seems like a huge amount of money. But if you think about what Gabe said earlier about the combined value of our systems being somewhere around $30 billion, and if just as a rule of thumb, you were to say that overall our assets have something like a 60-year lifespan. Now, some of them have a 100-year span, some of them have a 25-year span, but if you said they were about 60 years and you just divided that up by year to be sustainable, you would have to spend $500 million every year. That means the 5-year program would be $500 million. So even though we're spending a lot of money, we are probably not spending enough to keep all of our system in that fair, good, or very good condition, even currently. You can see also how we prioritize and what we're trying to accomplish with our investments in the system, and we've talked quite a bit about that already today. Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
We have talked a lot about this, but it's because it's important, and just to tag onto some of the comments made in the previous presentation, how we spend this money really is just as important as the fact that we are spending the money. And if we want different results, as Commissioner Hardesty was pointing out, we have to be innovative. We have to think about what those outcomes are. And so I'm pleased to say that we're doing that. I also wanted to just give a quick shout out to Office of Equity and Human Rights and their results-based accountability program. If you have not been through this, or if your staff has not been through this, as many, I think the newer commissioners may not have, it's an incredible program that the city offers. And we've sent cohorts through this to really kind of our thinking to make us more outcome driven rather than output driven, which can be, I think, where infrastructure can go otherwise. So, like I said, there's plenty to talk about this, and we want to focus in on our budget, but just to remember that we are doing things throughout the city that are helping us focus in on how we spend that money and where that money goes.
Great point. Next slide.
Thanks, and I'll just jump in again to, as we've been talking about our capital improvement program and how much we spend on capital, I wanted to break that down for you for water. So disaggregating here. So you can see the 5-year program, and in blue is our treatment program. So that includes filtration. You can see the large portion that's blue, it's going to filtration. In green is our transmission and terminal storage program. And you can see that the bigger bars there are including our pipeline to connect the new filtration plant. And then in orange, you can see sort of steady throughout the 5 years is our distribution program. And while that includes our Willamette River crossing, which is our seismic resilient pipe across the Willamette, it also includes sort of our bread and butter daily work to our ongoing core asset replacements. So that's mains and hydrants and meters and valves, all of that you can see in the orange. And then just one more I'll highlight. It's small, but I want to point out in light blue, there's our customer service program. You might wonder what we're doing on capital for customer service, but that includes AMI, advanced meter infrastructure. And we've got a placeholder in there. We have a study right now that should be complete in June that will help us inform our cost and scope and schedule. So we're very early days on this, but I just wanted to point that out because a lot of what council has asked in terms of how we can be more responsive to our customers with leaks and with all kinds of things, it does depend on being able to read our meters that way. So I wanted to point that out too. Next slide, we'll move over to the BES.
Commissioner Hardesty may have a question in that slide.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Solmer. I'm happy to wait until you're done, but I do want to go back to slide 8.
Sure.
And my question is really around the relationship with the other water users in the region that actually we contract with. As we move into fiscal year 23-24 and 24-25, I'm just concerned that it's going to cost Portlanders more and more because other East County cities are dropping out. Do we have a status of like who's still at the table, who's talking about building their own wells so they don't have to pay this additional cost? Because that burden is going to fall on our ratepayers if we don't have a plan.
That's right. And so we're the Water Bureau, we have a plan. And one thing I will say without getting too much into the detail, and I'm happy to follow up with your office to get you all the specific numbers, but all of our rate forecasts do include what we know now about our wholesale contractors. And I would say it's almost a worst case scenario. So we have taken out the wholesale contractors who we know are coming off of our system, but we haven't yet added in any work which is ongoing to create a regional partnership. So a new wholesale agreement that would allow us to provide emergency water. So that isn't even in our system. I think that would come back to support the system. But that has all been factored in. The wholesalers that are coming off the system have been factored into rates in our forecast. So that is all included. And then, again, just a quick shout out to Commissioner Mapps, who has taken this on to meet with our wholesale contractors and make sure that we are building those relationships so that we can build a regional partnership. So it might be a little counterintuitive, but I actually think that increased regionalization, the more emphasis that our metro and regional partners are putting in to the water system writ large is actually very good for our customers to have a resilient and reliable system.
So, Director, I would encourage us to maybe do a work session after the budget process, just so that my newer colleagues will have the same level of understanding of this very complicated redevelopment project that will be taking place.
I would love to. Thank you for that suggestion.
Could I ask a follow-up on that? Because that's been an ongoing concern of mine as well. The legacy contracts, none of us drafted them, but obviously they were highly disadvantageous to Portland ratepayers. So here's my question. Did you just mention we're providing emergency water? What did you say there? I wanted to make sure I understood that.
Sure. So we have a wholesale contract with 19 wholesale customers, and most of those contracts are 20-year contracts. So as you said, we have been in those for a while. So we are looking to 2026 is when most of those will be up. And those contracts worked for the sort of time and place that they were created, but they need to evolve. So for instance, we have generally take or pay contracts with our wholesalers. So they tell us how much they need, and then and they pay for that whether they take it or not. That's not really workable in 2021. And so we want to restructure those contracts again with some different principles, I think, at the table. And so specifically, we're looking at wholesalers who might be they might have their own water sources or are developing their own water sources, like the Rockwood district in Gresham. But they, in an emergency, they will need to rely on Portland Water. They may want to do that. So we are creating a contract in which it's more of a menu of items that they can pick from, that and how we can serve them in different ways.
Do those contracts include? Are they just done at the current rate, or is there something extra in those contracts that also addresses debt service and infrastructure costs?
I may need to pass that one off to our finance director, Cecilia Hune, just to make sure that I'm getting that exactly right for you, Mayor.
And I don't need to know right now. And I like Commissioner Hardesty's suggestion. This is an area I'm a little bit fuzzy in myself, but I really want to know whether or not, as we talk about what regional partnership means, and if I ever write a book about this experience, I'm going to note that the word partnership is the most overused and least understood term in the English language when it comes to government relations. But I just need to know that how are we setting the price, and is the price merely the cost of the water today in terms of delivery, or does it also get to the reality that we have to invest heavily in infrastructure in order to provide that spot price for water? And I would assume it's the latter, but I don't know that it's the latter, and I'd like to know if it is the latter.
Yeah, I think a work session is a great idea to really delve into this. It is far more complicated and more complex, I think, than I even realized. And I've been at this a little while, so it's fascinating, particularly in the Northwest. And it's yeah, you could write a book on it. I think it would be actually a pretty good page turner. Yeah.
No, but it doesn't matter. So am I. So free out.
Yeah, I would love to get further.
So let's do that work session at some point, maybe this summer. That would actually be that would be an interesting subject, and I'd like to learn more. And maybe we could even combine it with a tour of some of these facilities. I think that would be interesting too.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
So next slide, please. So here's the same configuration for BE. Our investments over the next 5 years kind of split up by asset type. And you can see the green parts of those bars much higher in the next 2 or 3 years and then tapering off. The secondary treatment project out at Columbia Boulevard, mandated by EPA. And we will be spending a fair amount of money over the next 3 years, and then that will begin to fade. You also see the blue bar that has some projects that have been in the pipeline. Those are pipe replacement projects. Many of our average age of our pipes is 80 years. We have pipes in downtown that are 120 years old, currently being replaced. And that will always be, and as the treatment plant costs begin go down in the next few years, that blue bar will get larger and be pretty stable because we have to always replace pipe. The other one of note is the black bar, restoration remediation. Very difficult for us to predict that bar in the out years because we are now in remedial design for the entire Portland Harbor site. When we come out of remedial design, we will actually be starting to work on remediation. That's where the big numbers are. We don't know yet what Portland's share of that will be. Allocation should occur in the next year or two, where we will begin to understand our total obligation. So watch that black bar in out years beyond the 5-year plan that we have now. Next slide. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess I just wanted to sort of transition from those really big numbers in our capital improvements and that work to what our customers see. So what is the bill that they get on a monthly or quarterly basis, and where does that money go that they are diligently paying? So I guess the first thing is that it's often known as your water bill. If we can correct that confusion, maybe Mike would not like to correct it.
Oh, no.
It is, your water, sewer, and stormwater bill, and you can see sort of that 2/3 split on sewer and stormwater, and about a third onto the water system. I think that this is, again, a good way for us to explain how the money from our ratepayers is invested and how that supports that mix of infrastructure and resiliency and environmental stewardship, as Mike talked about, and utility services, again, that go back and sort of invest in our economy and our community. So thanks for letting us set the stage there. Next slide.
Yeah, that translates into a bill. And as you can see, on the left is the current bill. On the right would be the bill with the proposed budget in place. The total increase, we'll get to a slide at the end, but total increase overall for both bureaus is just under 5%. And you can see the split between BES in green, water in blue. BES, again, is almost 2/3 of the bill. You also can see on these slides the two tiers of our low-income program. And you can see that tier 1, which is eligible for people at 60% median family income, and that is about 60 in the 60s. And then you can see the tier 2, which folks of 30% MFI are eligible, and you can see the bills in the mid-20s. So we have other programs that Gabe will talk about a little bit at the end of the presentation, but those are our two main low-income programs, and you can see the impact they have on the average single-family residential bill. Next slide. This gives you a sense of where Portland fits vis-a-vis some other cities. The ones above Portland generally, although there are a couple also below, are generally national comparators, and they weren't randomly picked. Those are systems that are similar to Portland. They have a CSO component to them. They are of a similar size and demographic. So we tried to pick national comparators that are similar to us. And then you can see there are some local comparators too, Gresham, Vancouver, Hillsborough, et cetera, to try and give you a sense of the bill. You can see that we're somewhere in the middle. We probably will remain somewhere in the middle going forward. One of the drivers that has driven us up in the past, but now other comparators are going up faster than us, and that was the CSO program, the combined sewer program that we finished in 2011. Many of our national comparators are just getting into their programs, and their bills are going up faster. However, almost every comparator, and I guess I could say every comparator nationally has a filtration plant system already. We are now at the front end of that expenditure, and so that may cause us to go up a little bit, which I think net keeps us roughly in the middle of the pack as a overall comparison. Next slide.
And I'll go through this relatively quickly. Again, happy to answer any questions. We've got about 2 slides and 2 minutes to keep us on task. But as Mike said, we do know that our rates are affordable to many customers. I won't say all because it's not affordable for all. We do have a number of ways, though, that we try to reach customers who are having trouble paying their utility bills. We have financial assistance programs to help people with, to help customers who have lower incomes or are going through some level of crisis. And I think that that's been really important during the pandemic, whether that is, as Mike said, our tier 1 or tier 2 discounts. And you have to get a bill to get a discount on your bill. So those are available to single family dwellings. And so we did reach out a number of years ago, again, pre-pandemic, to try to reach our customers in multifamily. Because they don't get a bill, we are limited in how we can reach out to them. We have partnered with Home Forward and the straw agencies to reach them. We have also looked at other options because we know that we're still not meeting that need. So I just want to be really clear that affordability is the focus for both bureaus. And we are doing that again through a number of different issues, different options. Next slide.
So very quickly, this slide gives you a sense of kind of the history and the projection for our rate increases. The blue bar is water, the green bar at the bottom is BES, and then the combined bill is that black line in the middle. And what you perhaps can't see very well is that for this graph on the left, if you extended that out, you see that BES's bill was even higher than the 5.3% increase in 13-14. We were the 7s and 8s back in the aughts of 2000 in the middle of the CSO project. And so you can see how our bill has come down and how we are trying to stabilize at about 3% to make that predictable and sustainable over time. Water, on the other hand, is just entering into some major capital work that needs to be issued for much of that work. And see that the bill has risen a bit, and however, water also is trying to stabilize that bill and make it predictable and sustainable to be able to complete those projects. When those projects start to roll off the debt service, you'll see that bill start to come down again, just as BES did post CSO. So I'll stop there. We've gone over our time just a bit. So we'll stop and take some questions, I think. Commissioner Mapps.
Commissioner Mapps, then.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, directors. That was a really fascinating and innovative presentation. I love the way you were able to bring together the experience of two bureaus and sort of describe it as a system. I'd like to see approaches like that modeled in other places throughout the city. I was wondering if you could answer a three-part question for me, which we didn't get a chance to address during the presentation. Or we could address more fully, maybe is how I should put it. First is how are you responding to COVID, both in the Water Bureau and over at BES? How has COVID impacted our revenues into both of these important bureaus? And finally, are we going to see any rate changes in water or environmental services because of the COVID crisis?
You want to start, Gabe? You want me to?
Well, I'll start and fill in. Thank you for those questions. I think they're on everyone's mind, so I appreciate the chance to answer. When we look at that last slide with the rate forecast, we have stayed in, again, with the mayor's guidance on the budget. We have stayed within our rate forecast, so we have not included those impacts from COVID. I think that that talks a little bit to your second and third part of the question. We have used cost containment measures to offset those lost revenues. So, I think there's a couple of things when we talk about the financial impact from COVID. One is, to sort of mix water and BES, and Mike can jump in too, but we know on the water side, we're down 20 to 25% in terms of usage. Most of that is commercial usage. That translates to, again, just on the water side, $30 million projected through 22-23. So my crystal ball is a little fuzzy. I don't know how we're going to come out of this pandemic, but we've sort of looked at a worst case scenario, and assuming not getting down to pre-pandemic levels until 22-23. If that's true, it will be a projected loss of $30 million, again, from revenue loss, money that's just not coming in because these businesses are not there and that use is not there. And so, our budgets are built on these five-year continuum. And when we see revenue shortfalls, we're able to control those costs in the short run through vacancy savings and deferred or delayed expenditures. So assuming that downturn doesn't extend too long, and again, none of us know how this will come out, that's how we retain our capacity to manage into recovery. But I want to just be really clear, we are making trade-offs. We're not hiring staff that we would have, and we're managing our capital program. All those wonderful things that we talked about to maintain our assets, we have to make very careful, very strategic trade-offs to let us stay within our rate forecast. And the other part of this is we're looking at federal and state funds. So besides our customers, who else can pay for some of these lost revenues? And we're working on that now in conjunction with the city, because it's all connected. The other piece that I want to just mention is accounts receivable. So this is, I guess you can think of it as people, customers who may pay their bills, but they're delayed. So this could be truly lost. It could be bad debt that we'll just have to write off because these businesses no longer exist. People have moved. But it may also be just delayed payments, money that will come in, but that we'll need to work with people on a payment plan, payment arrangements. And we have been doing that. We have qualified into our low-income program 1,700 households without income verification. That allows us to get them into the program and right away. And we have phases as we're going through this. So we really are kind of taking it one day at a time with those account balances, and it requires, I think, a really customized solution. People have all different kinds of reasons why they are not paying, and we want to work with them so that we can figure out what their needs are. Mike, anything to add to that?
No, ditto, except times 2.
Yeah.
Our revenue loss, we're projecting over the last fiscal year and the current fiscal year, or projecting to the next fiscal year, we're thinking will be between $70 and $100 million. Everything else, we're doing very similar things that water is doing, managing all of our cost structures. And it's a month-to-month prediction. We've seen revenue drops from 0% very early in COVID to now roughly 8% loss of revenue per month. And so it's varying. We watch it every month. And again, you can't predict the end. So we're just hoping that the trough is going to end somewhere around the end of next fiscal year is our projection.
Rita, then Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Okay, several of my questions were answered in your presentation, so thank you. I'm going to focus on East Portland and assistance. We've had the program with the BES regarding the off-street stormwater usage where property owners can get a credit so they aren't paying for that. And I understand from discussions on this before that it's not tied to the property, it's tied to the individual who is receiving the bill to apply for that credit. I just think the outreach isn't that great on that. As an individual who lived in that area since the beginning of all that and the issues, I find often new people who go, whether it be a rental unit or a purchase, unless they read through every paper you guys sent in the bill, they're not noticing this is available to them, because I'm also usually recommending, I have a commercial property, so I always, when I change tenants, make sure they apply for it. So that's one thing with outreach. The other outreach is with your discounts for low income. This has come up in discussions in East Portland Action Plan meetings. Is I know you use the straw network, and I brought this up once before about how many, those applications that they have to apply, because it's an application process, how many are they put in different languages, or does the straw network have to translate, which makes their funding is a lot narrower on what they can do? So is that being done? Because a lot of the people who need this the most cannot read English. And so unless they've got someone to walk through the application, they're going to have difficulty with, and frustration, usually don't even apply. And the other is the Housing Bureau has expanded outside the straw network for rental assistance and stuff. Are you expanding to those minority organizations, those ethnic organizations, to help get the word out for these programs? Because those are the ones who need it the most. Thank you. That's it, I think.
Well, I know we're short on time, but I guess I just wanted to echo your concerns and your comments, and also say I think this is an outreach issue. It's also a chance for us to re-envision how we connect with our trusted local partners. So we know through the pandemic that we have communities that are unwilling or just scared, and I don't think that's without reason, of reaching out to government agencies. And so I think it is really important that we find the community structures and networks that we can connect to actually get this assistance into the hands of the people who need it. So I think it's less about additional flyers and sort of traditional communication, and more about innovation and working with the partners who are in the community and who are sort of trusted advocates for this. But I completely agree with your train of thought that this is really important to make sure that it gets to those end users.
And one more comment is, I've in another meeting regarding COVID vaccines, they're doing something special in East Portland and utilizing the schools. We have a network and often they trust the information coming from the schools. So it's another network where possibly we can start collaborating more to get information out to these populations. Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Ryan, and then Jessica, as our timekeeper, would like to move us on after that. So Commissioner Ryan.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'll try to be really quick. If you look at slide 10, that was the one where you had the bill up, if you will. I'm going to say something. Here's a commissioner saying something you all think about all the time. So pardon me for saying some obvious things, but especially this summer and in the fall, I had so many people ask me about their water and sewer bill like never before. Because I think especially small businesses, whether it's restaurants or small gyms, they were doing all they could to survive. And of course, their usage went way, way, way down. And then they were so perplexed about why their bill hadn't gone down proportionally. And you did explain that. And so what am I saying? I'm saying that I hope that you all continue to look at how that bill is presented so that we do a better job of explaining the different pots of money of investments. And I know that you're working on this based on what I just listened to. But I think sometimes we have an insider's way of explaining things, which glazes most people over. And so make it digestible so your average person can understand what you're saying in terms of those investments. And I hope that is taken with, I hope you understand what I mean by that. And I know if the slide was up, I could go a little deeper, but I see Commissioner Mapps nodding his head. And so thank you, Commissioner Mapps, and I trust you. This is also just something I can't help to say because I heard about it in Camas and also I think in Hillsborough. And of course, this is going to go against you getting more revenue, but it's a way to connect the dots between our small businesses and our utilities. So in those jurisdictions, they had some type of system. Yes, Commissioner Ryan, those are smaller towns. This would be really hard to do in Portland. Okay, knowing you might be saying that, I'm going to keep going. They would get like receipts from the small businesses, say a resident, where they had been shopping, and then they can utilize those receipts to have a discount on their water and sewer bill in those municipalities. And I think back to innovation as we look to revive our economy and get the currency flowing again and our shared sacrifice and shared responsibility, maybe there's a way we could look into something like that. So I just needed to put that little plug out. Thanks.
I love the innovation. I think that is going to be, to me, the silver lining of the pandemic is that we have to think differently. We have to do differently. And so whether it's that kind of rewards program, I think everything's on the table because we can see sort of the discrepancies and the disparities laid bare. That's what the pandemic showed us. We have to build back better. We have to figure out how we're going to do things differently. We cannot go back to the same way that we've done things.
Thank you. And I just have to end with a comment that when I listen to both presentations, I always like to figure out what's the North Star, what's the aspirational goal. In both bureaus, it's clean water, access to clean water for everyone. And so I just wanted to say it was really crystal clear in your presentations. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to transition to have a couple of really important engaged community oversight bodies that attend all of the public meetings related to the water and the Bureau of Environmental Services and offer their feedback to the council at this, typically during these sessions. We have the
Jessica, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your sound quality is terrible. Is there some way you could move the mic close? I have a feeling there's something obstructing your mic, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
All right, just a moment. I'm going to plug in a headset.
Right there. Yeah,
that's good.
Whatever you just did the trick.
Okay, can you hear me?
Maybe try it.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead. It's good enough.
Okay, so we have a couple of community oversight bodies. Okay, great. And so typically at this point, they come to the council and they offer their feedback and their advice, having listened in on a handful of public meetings for the Bureau of Environmental Services and the Water Bureau. One is the Oregon Citizens Utility Board. Janice Thompson is the deputy director, and she typically comes and offers her remarks. Unfortunately, she had an illness in the family and was unable to come present today, but she did submit her report in writing, and you all have that report in writing as part of your packet materials. We do have our own Portland Utility Board, the PUB voting members here to give their report and their feedback. They hold frequent meetings and function as our own community oversight body, directly advising the council on behalf of the community of the Water Bureau and the Bureau of Environmental Services functions. So I'd like to introduce Teresa Huang, who will offer the report, and Karen Spencer, who is also here to answer questions. So I'll turn it over to you, Teresa.
We can't hear you, Teresa. Not sure what's happening with your computer. You're off mute.
Do you have the headset plugged in, Teresa? Earbuds activated, AirPods. That's all my ideas, folks. That's as far as
you don't even know how any of those work.
I don't know what I was just saying, Commissioner. I was just making stuff up on the fly, but it sounded really smart.
Mayor, if I may, while Teresa's trying to get her sound, I just wanted to make sure that we put on the public record the concerns that that were raised by some of the concerns raised by the Oregon Citizens Utility Board. And some were just around how we're funding assistance programs. They have a recommendation of increasing the vouchers from $150 to $500 to improve the Tier 2 support for extremely low-income community members. Tier 1 should have a 50% bill reduction, Tier 2, 80%. I just think they've got some really good analysis, and just wanted to appreciate, as always, Janice Thompson for her very detailed, thoughtful reporting, and would encourage my colleagues in the Budget Committee to review the memo dated March 18th. I was trying to help Teresa, so did we fix it?
Sorry, I tried getting off and
Oh,
on
we hear
again.
you.
Okay, good.
Excellent. See, I helped, right? It was just, as long as I talked enough, you could get on. Excellent.
Thank you so much. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'll start from the beginning again. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, and Community Advisory members. My name is Teresa Huang. I have been a member of the Portland Utility Board, or PUB, since this January. And I also have PUB member Karen Spencer here with me to help answer any questions you may have. The PUB was created as an independent community oversight body for the public utility bureaus, the water and BES. And thank you for the opportunity to share with you our budget recommendations. This has been a really challenging year with a shift to virtual meetings and onboarding 4 new board members while also developing budget recommendations. The PUB appreciates the support received to help navigate the complexities of these bureaus, programs, and budgets. Equity considerations remain at the core of PUB conversations and priorities, complemented by other key values and work plan frames. Next month, you will receive the written letter with detailed recommendations, but we would also like to highlight a few key items for you today. The PUB's first focus remains concerned about the affordability of water, sewer, and stormwater rates, and we understand there is a delicate balance between the affordability and capital investments needed for long-term infrastructure maintenance. The 4.9% combined rate increase could prove unaffordable to many Portlanders that already bear the brunt of structural inequities. The financial impacts for many have only worsened with the pressures of the pandemic, and the PUB appreciates the efforts made by the bureaus to mitigate some of those impacts. The PUB supports assistance programs such as the increased funding for fixture repairs and rental assistance. We are also concerned about how the $20 million of accounts in arrears may affect operations and rates for both bureaus, and therefore could impact capacity to expand and promote financial assistance programs. The usage of some financial assistance resources is lower than expected, and the bureaus need to address the lack of awareness of these resources. The PUB recommends increase in program flexibility to increase usage that better reflects community needs. For example, if demand remains low in the voucher program, we suggest modifications to reallocate funds to other financial assistance programs with higher demand. The PUB appreciates the first round of small business relief grants and recommend another round of grants with a continued focus on short-term relief for Black, Indigenous, people of color, and women-owned businesses to support those most negatively impacted by the pandemic. The PUB also recognizes that the available programs cannot reach everyone that needs utility rate assistance. We encourage BES to expeditiously complete the rate study that may provide another avenue to address escalating stormwater rates and inequities of existing rate methodology. The PUB supports the community engagement position related to the rate study, as well as other engagement efforts such as promoting the voucher program for multifamily housing recommended by the City Budget Office. The bureaus were responsive in identifying ways to address reductions in revenues, including holding positions vacant. We commend this approach, but also recognize the work has not decreased and can negatively impact staff. The PUB encourages the bureaus to monitor workload and consider filling some vacancies if the revenue comes in higher than expected. In addition, the PUB would also like to recommend an increased focus on planning for improved hiring, retention, and mentoring for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. There may be an opportunity to encourage entry-level job programs, and potential partnership between the two bureaus may create more equitable work cultures. The PUB supports the BES and water performance measures for the coming year and will continue to work with the bureaus as they further develop and refine measures. We support the change to calculate the rate increase impact, as well as estimating the benefit of capital improvement projects by using quintile household income instead of only median household income. This is a more accurate and fair way to assess economic impacts on lower income households. Finally, we commend both bureaus for the strides they are making towards equitable project delivery and community impacts, particularly through the positive influence of BES's new project management office, development of the community benefit agreements for STEP, and pilot of the contracting program to expand utilization of minority-owned, women-owned, and other disadvantaged businesses. We appreciate these efforts and look forward to future programs. Thank you for your time today. We are happy to answer any questions and look forward to providing our more detailed written recommendations next month. And apologize again for the technical difficulties.
Thanks. And Teresa, just for future reference, what turned out to be the issue with the sound, just in case somebody else runs into that?
I'm not sure. Sometimes my computer just happened to be a little bit glitchy, so I just went off the meeting and reloaded it, and it worked.
All right, that's good to know. Thanks. Colleagues, any questions at this point? Thank you, Teresa. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Turn it over to Director Rebecca Esau, who's going to give a presentation on the Bureau of Development Services.
Jessica, yours isn't working again. Why don't you, while somebody else is presenting, why don't you reboot your computer and see if that helps?
Good morning again. With me today are Deputy Director Elshad Hajiev and Kyle O'Brien, our Budget and Finance Manager. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, our customers represent the whole community with a wide range of project types. We especially play a critical role with customers who have never gotten a permit before, and it may be the one time they get a permit in their life, such as people trying to start their own business in a commercial space or get a food cart started, or artists trying to get permits for a performance venue, or homeowners trying to do a remodel or do repairs on their home. We've had a number of challenges coinciding with each other and are in a period of major transformation. February 2020, we launched the major upgrade to the city's software called Amanda, which is used to track development review, permitting, and inspections. This and other systems we put in place last year prior to the pandemic, such as our online customer portal, created the foundations we planned to build on through the coming years with more phases, and a lot of programming work remained. Then in March 2020, when city offices closed due to the pandemic, we had to divert those efforts to instead change all of our operations, and it forced immediate creation of online digital systems. We were at that time still very much in an in-person paper-based model and had to switch everything at once. This has been a massive change. And although it's the direction that we were already headed, the office closure meant we had to do this all at once with hundreds of paper permits still in the pipeline. Some of our new systems are interim while we continue to build the more permanent systems, and we're midstream in this work. The second issue that we're facing, we just got the permitting audit that's been released today, and you'll see that in the Oregonian and other stories. There's nothing in it that surprises us, frankly. The permitting system is too slow, we knew that, and the 7 bureaus involved don't have a comprehensive system to manage performance. We're committed to addressing this and have Commissioner Ryan's support in doing this with commissioners in charge and our partner bureaus. Third, it's just a very challenging system we have in place to coordinate the permitting work across 7 bureaus. And fourth, we now have a significant financial challenge with the fee revenue that supports our bureau dropping off significantly over the last year in particular. We have serious concerns about needing to do a second phase of layoffs at BDS and what that will do to our service delivery capacity, not only now, but in the years to come, as it's very difficult to recover from the scale of layoffs we would need to make without bridge funding. This would have detrimental impacts on Portland's economic recovery. Next, we've got technology challenges. It's a big focus of ours at the current time because that's what we're relying on to reach customers with the permit center closed. We built the foundations, as I said, back in February 2020, and we've launched things such as our new mobile technology for inspectors, and that's been going well. More programming is needed for BDS and our partner bureaus to get everything we need out of these systems, though. We just have the foundation built. A priority is the programming needed to pull data out of the system to get regular reports on the timeliness of our services, to then generate dashboards used to manage performance and to share with the public so that they can schedule their projects and budget them. It also involves programming needed to automate steps in the process for greater efficiency, with too many steps being manual still. I'll turn it over to Elshad.
Good morning, Elshad Hajiev, Deputy Director for the Bureau of Development Services. Majority of BDS fees are based on the valuation. And this means that the larger commercial projects with the higher project valuations are our main source of the revenue for the Bureau. And the large projects subsidize smaller, low valuation residential projects. Today, due to the pandemic, BDS is seeing lower commercial project activity, specifically in the new hotel construction, office space, retail, and multifamily. As you know, because of COVID, tourism has been hit very hard, and new hotel constructions are not needed in the coming years. Frankly, hotel market was already oversaturated even before the pandemic. Movement towards the teleworking is creating excess office space, and there is currently no demand for a new office space construction. Retail is also struggling right now, and many businesses will not survive the pandemic, and that will create another excess capacity in the retail space, lowering demand for the new construction. Multifamily construction was slowing down prior to the pandemic, and right now it's facing new challenges. Project financing is more difficult because of the stagnant retail rental rates, and there is a less demand for apartments specifically close to the city core. The only bright spot right now is the residential construction that remains relatively strong. However, when the large commercial activity drops off, the work is heavily weighted towards the smaller residential projects that do not generate enough revenue to offset the drop in revenue from large commercial projects. 98% of the BDS funding is coming from the fee revenue that I mentioned previously. Only 2% is coming from the general fund, and supports only one program. It's a neighborhood inspections program. Construction industry is extremely volatile, and 98% of our funding is directly related to that volatility, making the fluctuations in the revenues very profound. We do set aside substantial financial reserves to deal with that volatility in our revenues and also in the construction activity. We are drawing on these reserves and at the unsustainable rate. Right now, the rate is approximately $2.5 million monthly. And since the pandemic, through February of this year, we drawn $23.5 million from the reserves. Next slide, please. Thank you. BDS projects that over the 5-year horizon, we're expecting that for the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to expect the decline in the construction activity and in our revenues. As you see on the graph on your screen, the next 2 years show double-digit declines in revenues in our bureau. After that, we're expecting some sort of a recovery. However, while meeting with our financial advisory committee, we were advised that when recovery happens, most likely construction industry will be at the kind of a tail end of that recovery for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons being that the pandemic created the excess capacity in both hotels, multifamily, office space, retail, and that excess capacity needs to be absorbed by the market before new construction can begin. Financial Advisory Committee agreed and support our financial projections. During the times of the downturn, we use our staff to work on improvement projects to catch up on the tools needed to work well in our busier times. Currently, without the additional general fund, the draw on reserves will continue at an unsustainable rate, and BDS will need to reduce its workforce. That's the reality that we're facing right now. It is critical for the Bureau and for the city to be able to maintain our staff through this downturn and move forward important and necessary technology and process improvement work forward. Without the additional general fund support necessary to maintain our workforce, we will not be poised to effectively support the economic recovery in a year and a half. As Rebecca mentioned in the previous presentation, BDS has a very strong connection to the economy. The ability of BDS to provide timely, predictable services is essential in keeping the construction industry working. And we're adding to housing supply. We're supporting business development and attracting investment to Portland. The work we do aligns directly with the Council's priority of economic stability and recovery. And when we facilitate economic development, we play a significant part in generating revenue for our partner bureaus and also for the general fund. Again, without additional general fund support for BDS, we will need to proceed with laying off approximately 20 to 30 employees in May, June of 2021. The ability to provide timely service will be impacted both now and in the future when the economy improves without support from the general fund. As I mentioned before, we are projecting further declines in the next fiscal year in our revenue collections. The financial picture for BDS is precarious, and the ability to retain our experienced workforce during the economic downturn is a challenge. We've been proactive in addressing the downturn. We implemented the hiring freeze. We stopped all of the non-essential expenditures. We co-sponsored with BHR the safety net ordinance, and as of today, 14 our employees took advantage of the voluntary severance options, and a lot of our employees are utilizing other options in that ordinance. We did lay off 12 employees effective March of 2021. After all these measures that we put in place, unfortunately, there is no room to implement additional layoffs without negatively affecting Bureau's ability to provide timely services and make critical technology and process improvements. Second phase of layoff, if it happens, will leave us unprepared to support the economic recovery. Next slide, thank you. This is not the first time we're facing downturn. And we did learn a lot of lessons from 2008, 2009 Great Recession. It's important to be proactive and reduce expenditures and quickly so that way we can avoid major layoffs in the future. We did retain vacant positions to make sure that when the economy recovers, then we can quickly fill those positions and expand our workforce. Unfortunately, waiting too long to fill the positions puts us in direct competition with other bureaus, other jurisdictions, and the construction industry. And it will make it very difficult to find qualified candidates. And even with that, it usually takes 1 to 2 years to fully train for highly technical positions. One of our biggest asks is a bridge funding for the Bureau and also the technology request. It's approximately $6.7 million in one-time general fund money. That will help us avoid 20 to 30 FTE layoffs in May, June 2021. These positions that funding will also accelerate BDS technology and process improvement projects that are necessary to streamline city's development review process. Again, a slow development review process is detrimental for the economic recovery. Funding this request is essential in providing the resources and capacity to ensure timely service delivery, improve our systems and processes, and obtain the visibility and reporting from our system to help us identify and resolve issues early. Rebecca?
I see from Jessica, we have 5 minutes left, so we are going to fly through the remainder of the presentation. So,
Right. Rebecca, Commissioner Hardesty, did you want to ask a question now or hold off till the end?
I'll hold off till the end. If we'll have time at the end, I'll just wait till they're done.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca, but please leave some room at the end for Q&A.
Absolutely. So BDS is primarily known for its role with development review, permitting and inspecting development. A lesser known program is our neighborhood inspections program, where our role is to administer Title 29 related to safe and healthy housing for Portland's residents, dealing with deteriorating and dangerous buildings, neglected properties, hoarding situations, people breaking into vacant homes and living in them, etc. These are some before and after photos to demonstrate the community benefit of this program. And then we've got some additional photos here. And we can move to the next slide. The goal of the program is to get compliance and get these properties to a safe and healthy state, ideally without having to resort to the assessment of fines, fees, and penalties. This is why the restoration of the general fund cut and an additional $1 million in one-time general fund is so important to this program. Next slide, please. We are also requesting $1.2 million in one-time general fund for zoning code administration. They are involved in administering the zoning code when it comes to permits, as well as doing land use reviews. So they are an important link in the chain for providing timely permitting services. Next slide. Elsha?
Yes. The next slides are about our Empowered Communities program. There are 3 programs that support small businesses, arts, and home ownership. These programs are excellent programs to support our Black, Indigenous, people of color, and persons with disabilities. We provide a point of contact, research, and permitting help in these 3 programs. Next slide, please. The first one is a small business empowerment program. And we assist people with BIPOC and people with disabilities with their small business needs. Arts Empowerment Program. And just to let you know, we're going to be covering these slides in greater detail on April 1st. I'm just kind of going really fast through them today. And next slide, please. And then the Empowered Neighborhoods Program. We help BIPOC and people with disabilities who receive the notice of code violation to help them obtain the necessary permits and also find the resources to bring the property back into compliance. These 3 programs we're asking for funding from the Recreational Cannabis Fund. And again, as I mentioned, we will go over these slides in a greater detail on April 1st presentation.
Next, BDS has not invested as they should in community engagement in historic years, particularly with communities of color. And we need to change that and invest in developing and maintaining relationships with culturally specific communities. This takes sustained effort and staff time to build trust and credibility in these communities. And it's especially important to do that now as we're building these new systems and trying to remove barriers. Next slide. Another probably little known program at BDS is that we administer and enforce the city's sign code, which is Title 32. We try to keep the fees low for these services as we are often interacting with small businesses struggling to survive, especially now. We would prefer not to have to raise sign permit fees to cover the costs of the program and are requesting one-time general fund support. Elshad?
I already talked about the financial challenges that the Bureau is facing, and these financial challenges are making maintaining our workforce impossible without additional funding. In addition, our staff is stretched thin right now as it is without any additional layoffs that I talked about that are potential for May and June of 2021. We are balancing our daily work with process improvement while our staffing capacity is already low and at the risk of further reductions. A forthcoming audit recommendation points to the need for a citywide performance management system across all the bureaus that are involved in permitting process, which will take resources from, again, already stretched thin workforce. BDS is only one of the 7 permitting bureaus, and we are tasked with the coordination of these bureaus, each bureau having their own mission, priorities, and challenges. Another challenge that the Bureau is facing is succession planning. It's a challenge, especially with respect in attracting, maintaining diverse workforce, especially women and people of color into classifications that are traditionally filled by white males. We also identified a priority as identifying and measuring reporting on our outcomes, and specifically in regards to our demographic data, who are we serving? We're working towards this goal by moving to fill a data analyst position specifically dedicated to this task. This work is still very nascent, and much work needs to be done before we're able to collect and report on this data. BDS also has a role in promoting climate action by promoting and supporting energy retrofitting and clean energy. And again, without additional resources allocated to this work, it will be a challenge for the Bureau.
So I see that we are out of time. I want to be respectful of that so that there's time for discussion. I just can't overstate the importance of getting these one-time funding requests at a time when the community needs us to be capable of providing timely services.
Very good. Thank you, Director Esau. And just to that point, there's a couple of articles on the Oregonian website that are germane to this conversation as well that people might peruse. Commissioner Hardesty has been waiting patiently. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Esau and Deputy Director for that presentation. I'd like to go back to slide 7. Where you're projecting the decline in resources, and I really appreciated you, Esau, saying it will be a long recovery. So my very first question is, this one-time resource is not going to actually fix the problem that you are encountering, and I'm very concerned about the huge ask, knowing that it won't do anything to address the fact that the economic recovery of dollars for your Bureau will be years away. And so I guess I'm concerned that you have a significant financial package that you're asking for when you already know that it's going to be at least 3 to 4 years before you can safely expect that your resources will come back. So my question is, why would we invest one-time money knowing that next year you will have to make these cuts that you're not making this year? And it will be years before you're able to have the resources that you need to do your work, knowing that the whole city is taking cuts. I am concerned about this package, so just want to say that. So any response to that?
Absolutely. Oh,
well, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you for this question, Commissioner Hardesty. Unfortunately, the direction that we received from the city budget office is that we are not allowed to ask for ongoing general fund. So the only option that is available to the Bureau right now is to ask for one-time general fund. So if we had an option to ask for ongoing support, we would have, but we didn't have that option to ask for ongoing general fund. And you're absolutely correct. If we're projecting a reduction of revenues for 2 consecutive years, it makes more sense to ask for ongoing general fund support. However, whatever we can get right now, we're thankful for that. And even one-time infusion of general fund will help us a lot.
So my second question has to do with, it looks like this neighborhood program that you're recommending is a program that currently Prosper Portland does. And I'm just trying to figure out why we would be creating a, what did you call it? Empowered, wait, hang on. It's in one of these pieces of papers.
Yes. The Empowered Communities Program for small businesses.
Yes, for small businesses, it sounds a lot like programs that Prosper Portland is already doing, and I don't see the value that would be added by creating another program like that.
It's already in existence, and it works hand in hand with Prosper's program. So their program, they're providing connecting small business owners, entrepreneurs with resources. Our program is helping a small business owner navigate the permitting process and providing that single point of contact in what can be a morass between the 7 bureaus involved in permitting. So the roles are a little bit different, but we do work in partnership with Prosper Portland in providing that assistance to small business owners. So it's a wraparound sort of service.
Thank you. I'll have more questions, but I'll be respectful that other people have questions as well.
Very good. And Commissioner Ryan, are you making a comment responsive to that, or do you just have some questions?
I can go after Frida with a comment. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah.
Then Commissioner Ryan after Frida.
I have to say that Commissioner Hardesty's question was my first question as well, because it did not seem logical, because early on we were told that your reduction in permitting and stuff was going to last 2-3 years before it would really start to rebound. But on your succession planning, and I'm going to bring again, I've got the school background, is the internships. I got to thinking about it, if you bring in more of the high school, possibly seniors, but also because you say your positions are very technical and it takes time to train, is to work in tandem with advising them and with the school district on what courses they may need to take at the community college, and work with them as they're learning those courses. They could also be learning your area as well, and become better, well-trained, and kind of reduce the time type of thing. So just a thought from a school perspective. In regard to energy fund, are you working on your climate change and solar that you mentioned on one of your slides? Are you working with the Clean Energy Fund project that they've got that is going with the new funding for that, so that it might help? Because I have a strong feeling that a lot of those are community-based organizations doing that, and they're going to need some technical expertise. So if there's some way the measure allows that in it, I think it'd be great.
Yes, to answer that question, the request related to creating a point of contact for businesses that are working in the solar industry or retrofitting to provide energy efficiency. That's intended to work hand in hand with the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which is going to be allocating those funds, but there needs to be a point of contact on our end to help those people, once they have those funds, to navigate the permitting process to get those permits as quickly and seamlessly as possible. So it's very much a handoff we're expecting to create, and hoping to have that position funded. And I take your point about succession planning. That's very much on my radar. We're working on creating a succession plan, knowing that many of our inspectors are eligible for retirement in the coming 3 years, and those are particularly difficult positions to fill, very technical, requiring certifications at the state level. And so it's incumbent on us to be working with the high schools and creating those steps in the ladder to be able to qualify for those positions and compete for them. So very interested in that.
Yeah, and you may want to think, as we say, outside the box, because our school district and hiring has had to do the same, because we have the same issues with succession planning. So we've had to think well outside the box. In fact, I mentioned our current new high school principal only had associates when he started teaching at the high school in automotive, and now he is certified at the administration level and is becoming a principal. So, and at one time, no one would to hire someone like that to work in the school. So it's thinking outside the box, but I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Esau. And if you could put up slide 7 again, that would be helpful. I just want to start off by saying, can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah. I just want to start off by saying that from listening to your report, I hope everyone picked up on BDS being a direct service provider. This is a bureau that is customer facing. And I think it's also been interesting to learn that 98% of the revenue is from the construction. And then I also think it's really valuable to hear how Director Esau and Elshad have been able to be fiscally responsible, and they learned so much from the economic recession of 2008 and have been very careful to build the reserves during the high times, if you will, just a few years ago. And so thank you for that fiscal prudence. I think what's maybe confusing to me right now and our colleagues is the fact that we show this projection uptick in 22-23. And I think that that's the challenge, is that we know that we're getting advice on how to deal with this for this year that we're in, but we also know that the revenues coming from the big construction projects might not be ready by 22-23. So I think that this council just needs to also know that we're in for a longer haul in terms of preserving this direct services that help our small businesses, our low-income providers throughout the city. And the last thing we can do is get rid of our labor force, because you gave really good arguments on the capacity it takes to rebuild that infrastructure. So we are trying, if in fact we have economic survival and recovery as one of our top 3 priorities, why would we try to handicap the direct service organization in our city that allows those currencies and those revenue streams to benefit the entire city? And so I get what we're doing. We're trying to really protect the labor force of this organization and not repeat the most recent mistakes that we made in 2008. I just think there's a little bit of confusion perhaps about some of our rosy economic projections for 22-23, as we think it might be sustained much longer, this downturn. I hope that was helpful. And if Director Esau, if you want to make a comment on why, if you want to tell us why there's an uptick in 22-23, that would be helpful.
I can respond to that. The uptick is actually relative to what we experienced before. And if you can see, uptick doesn't even get to the level that we experienced in year 2019-20. Thank you. It's still at $52 million, almost $53 million. It's lower than 2021. It's lower than any other year that we show in that graph. So uptick is relative, and it just shows that economy will start recovering at some point, but it will not go anywhere close to even to pre-COVID rates until later in the forecast, and we're thinking year 4 or 5.
I think the complexity of this downturn is one factor, and I think the other is the proportionality of these bar slides is a little off. So that also tricks the brain because of the visual. Yeah. All right, we'll work on that.
All right, thanks everybody. And I'm sorry to keep us moving, but we've still got BPS ahead. Director Kennard, hopefully we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So I'm going to turn it over to Donnie Oliveira with the Bureau to talk about the city's planning.
All right. Thanks, Director Kennard. Can we start the deck, please? And thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, and our community advisory members. My name is Donnie Oliveira. I'm the Deputy Director at the Portland Planning and Sustainability Bureau. And a couple weeks ago, Director Durbin, and she couldn't be here today, but she sends her regards, talked about our climate work. And today I'm going to dive into our planning program, and our Chief Planner, Joe Zenders, here as well to chip in. And the next week, the Portland Clean Energy Fund will be coming to council to present the first grouping of grants for your consideration. So you'll get an update on that program at that time. So we're really going to focus on the planning program today. And just to kind of get out of the gate, about 75% of BPS's general fund allocation of 9.7 million goes to our planning program. And of that percentage of general fund for planning, a predominant portion of it goes, 90% of it goes to staff. So we are a group of staff of program that's focused on being in the community and bringing our technical expertise to the city work. So next slide, please. So really at its core, BPS's planning program is a convener and coordinator for complex projects that balance multiple objectives that set the direction for Portland's future. We use land use, urban design, co-development, and economic planning analysis to shape future growth through our plans, both citywide and local policies and projects with the focus towards creating complete neighborhoods. But these efforts don't happen in a vacuum, of course. We rely on the collaboration and the expertise of our partner bureaus to develop and implement programs that are feasible, equitable, and really shape the growth of our vibrant centers and corridors for all neighborhoods across all of Portland. We are committed to meeting the housing crisis and that challenge through increasing the housing options, supply and affordability. And of course, in this time of economic uncertainty, our focus is shifting to accelerating commercial development, business growth, to grow good jobs and an equitable low carbon economy. And that's our aspirational work. But the truth is much of BPS's planning work is mandated to meet federal regulations, state land use or state legislation, our own comprehensive plan mandates, and our community commitments. We have a robust staff that is focused between 6 programs that's focused on everything from technical expertise and code through urban design, economic analysis, and they're all there to support meeting our mandates, whether it be how we roll out the comprehensive plan 2035, our own Central City through 2035 plan, or something like HB 2001, our middle housing piece of legislation that we've implemented as the residential info project. All those projects have a matrix of staff throughout the Bureau who are bringing their level of expertise to play to ensure that we have both equitable and frankly legally sound policies for your consideration. This is all foundational to the work that BPS does from the planning side. What's added to this, and I've seen several comments about this, and I think Commissioner Hardesty just added this as well, to this work and planning is our commitment to working with community. I think beyond just being planners, BPS's staff are very proud of the level of engagement and stakeholder interaction that we have for all of our programs. And what this is really intentional around how it's not just what we do and why we do it, but it's how we do the work. And this is around our commitment to community engagement, community co-creation, and frankly, ensuring that Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities have a voice and are at the table for the creation of our policies. This ensures that our outcomes are equitable and that potential for prosperity is shared across all communities. This is as much a focus of our work for the last several years as it has been at any point in time at BPS, and this is showing up in the way we do our work. I'm going to share that in a little bit. So I wanted to, next slide, please. Use a couple of examples of this work because I wanted to do a little myth busting here on behalf of my colleagues on the planning side about the type of work we do. There is a assumption, and frankly, it's built on proof that a lot of the work we do is just planning. But BPS doesn't just do the plans. We also are in a role of implementer. I'm going to use a few examples that just happened at council that you all can, for the mayor and Commissioner Hardesty can remember firsthand, and for our new commissioners, kind of get a snapshot of what it looks like. So this past summer, we readopted the Central City 2035 plan, which functions as our Central City's code matrix for how we are going to develop and see the future of our Central City. It sets out everything from our policies and tools for how Central City can be developed. And it also sets sort of guidelines for our city infrastructure bureaus to regulate and permit. But beyond that work, our planners that are focused on Central City have since pivoted from the plan to implementation. And what that looks like is specifically focusing on projects and policies that accelerate development in Central City. So they're looking at catalytic development opportunities that would accelerate growth and respond to the impacts that the pandemic, our housing crisis, and some of the demonstrations from this summer have had on Central City and its residents and businesses. So our planners have moved into an implementation of Central City. Similarly, with the expanded opportunities for affordable housing project that came to council last summer, that was in response to a grant that we received from Metro that looked at ways for us to create more housing opportunities and leverage the interests of our community-based organizations to provide housing. So we brought a policy package to council in the spring of last year, right at the onset of the pandemic. And since then, we brought a package back to you all in February that focused on 5 more sites to, again, provide opportunities and create new ways to address our housing crisis. And then the last thing I'll share is that the expiration date extension project, it's a very technical name of a policy that was in response to the pandemic, was a policy package that came to council last summer that addressed the land use review timelines that were in place to accelerate development during the pandemic. And this was in coordination with BDS and their team to really bring more tools to the table for them and our development partners. I share these as examples of ways that BPS is on the ground being responsive to the needs of our community, both at large, within our development community, and also our housing advocate community to ensure that we have tools in real time to put in place. So yes, we're thinking long-term, we're thinking 2035, but in the interim, we're also trying to be responsive to the needs of our city. Next slide, please. And the last thing I want to share of a recent success was the Housing Opportunities Initiative, which was a suite of policies that came before council over the last 2 years that really addressed our ability to meet our city's urban growth goals. So as many of you know, we are not only have a housing crisis with how we're sheltering our houseless neighbors, but we also have a gap in terms of capacity for incoming Portlanders and people that want to own homes and spaces in our fine city. And so what this suite of packages did was looked at the ways that we can create density in our neighborhoods to ensure that people have more access to resources. We're building multifamily dwellings that are conducive to families and modern families, not just the traditional style, and really creating a host of tools for both our private home builders and our nonprofit sectors to use to really create opportunities for homes and housing for our families. I share this project not just because of the robust nature, and it was truly first of its kind, but also because the amount of work that our planners did in doing engagement. We received thousands of comments. We had over several hundred community workshops between the projects, speaking to hundreds, if not thousands, of Portlanders directly throughout the way to really make sure they understand, so that the council, when we received those policies, they were council ready with robust engagement that we could speak to and point to validate the work that was done. So again, we're not just doing the planning on the codes, we're also doing engagement to ensure that Portlanders are being heard as these processes are being developed. Next slide, please. And then what's on the horizon? I spoke to some of the mandates that we have from the state and from federal regulations that we look to, but we also have commitments that we make to community and our community leaders, to this council, about how we are showing up to address displacement and inequalities in our, and frankly, in our land use code history. And it looks like several projects, one that's right on your plate right now, which is Shelter to Housing. Out of the Housing Opportunities Initiative, we did launch the Anti-Displacement Task Force, which is leading to an action plan. The spatial justice zoning is an exciting project that we've just started scoping that will really look at addressing past harms from our historically, frankly, racist planning history to address how we accelerate not just preventing displacement, but creating opportunities for business development, home ownership, access to generating wealth for our Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. And another big tool that we'll be kicking off next week is looking at it's a state mandated economic opportunity analysis that is a requirement, but it's also a tool that the city will look at. BPS will lead that community engagement work to really discuss how we meet the needs and the requirements of the city for our workforce, both in industrial lands and just in the commercial sector. This is a great opportunity for us to think about how we shape our future and deploy resources to frankly, not only meet our workforce goals, but to exceed them. Next slide, please. And while we look at the care and feeding of our communities from a economic perspective, look at our development, we also take care of our natural resources. That looks like for 2021, updating our environmental zones. Council will be seeing a policy package this summer that will update our basically our E-zone maps that will sort of outline hazardous areas, but also protect existing natural resources from development. We'll also be bringing a package in the spring on the floodplain zoning. This is a really important federal regulation through FEMA that will increase protections, get the city up to code on guidelines for how we protect our waterways, how we ensure we're protecting and creating capacity for our zone flood management. However, it also is an opportunity to ensure that our residents and business have access to floodplain insurance that's federally backed. So it's actually really critical to get that done. And there's a spring bump decision package I'll talk about shortly. And the last thing is, yes, we are the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, so there is a nexus between planning and sustainability. And this frequently shows up in our climate resiliency work. It's not just looking at how we're mitigating, which Director Durbin spoke to a couple weeks ago, but how are we ensuring that our resources are protected and resilient to the impacts of climate change as we're experiencing it year after year. Next slide, please. Okay, so if there's one slide, commissioners, that I would ask you to think about as we leave this presentation today, it's this one. As I alluded to, the planning program at BPS is predominantly funded by general fund. Approximately 94% of the planning budget comes from general fund at this point. And since the creation of separate bureaus between planning and development services many years ago, long-range planning has been overly dependent on one-time resources to pay for core responsibilities, whether it be meeting state or federal mandates, implementing our comprehensive plan, both the old one and the current one. For many years, BPS has relied on one-time funding to support that work and that staff. But as one-time funding availability has reduced, both from general fund, from interagency agreements, and from grantors, both federal, state, regional grants, our staff capacity has waned. What has not, and this is a common theme of today's presentations, is the workload. So as you can see here, while we have supplemented our work with grants and one-time funding, the fact remains that we have seen a steady decrease in ongoing planner capacity. It's not exactly clear, but over the last 3 years, we've actually lost 8 permanent planners. And this is basically played out as far as when we have people retire or staff that leave, we just don't fill those positions. And while we've been able to navigate that by moving staff around to meet the emergent needs, both like from the emergencies that we experienced, housing and the pandemic, the fact remains that we just don't have the capacity right now to meet both those emerging requests and needs and maintain the mandates. And as we see that's developing at the state right now in the legislative session, there are some new mandates coming down that we'll have to staff up to implement. So this is our challenge right here, commissioners, is that we are trying to balance our workload. And so on the whole, both Joe Zender, Director Durbin, and I, we've been talking about what does long-term planning look like for the Bureau, but simultaneously we're trying to balance work planning in the day-to-day. So what that looks like, next slide, please. In this moment is, there are 3 decision points that you will have in the coming months that I will ask for your consideration. The first is, as a part of our 5% constraint package that we submit as part of our budget, 2 planning positions were cut, and those are staffed positions. We have exhausted our vacancies on the planning side, so we're at the point of cuts that required cutting positions that were occupied. And so as a part of one of our decision packages in the budget is a add back request of $263,000 to keep those 2 positions as a part of our planning program. As part of the spring bump, we have a request to carry over $210,000 from resources that we received in the fall bump to keep our floodplain work going. Again, this is a multi-bureau project. This is really critical to both meeting federal standards and to meeting some legal requirements. This is critical work that BPS already has resources for, and we ask to continue that into next fiscal. And then the second spring bump request that we will be submitting is $100,000 of carryover of one-time funds to fund our age-friendly program. So this is an interesting opportunity for both the city and BPS. We actually received this money to do an age-friendly program, but our age-friendly program manager was pulled to the ECC as part of the COVID-19 response. And since that time has been working not only with that team, but also to implement a CARES Act program supporting underserved community members with disabilities as a part of the COVID response. So we're asking to carry those resources forward to keep that planner staffed to next fiscal so we can pick up that work in the coming year. And that ends my presentation. So thanks for your time. I know I'm over.
Great. And colleagues, any questions at this point? Commissioner Frida has a question.
I always seem to have a question, but it triggered something listed at the sides with the anti-displacement. As many of the commissioners know, East Portland is suffering through displacement, involuntary displacement right now. In fact, it's escalating. We're very concerned with the end of the rental moratorium, eviction moratorium, that we're going to see it exasperated. And I was wondering, the Housing Bureau has quite a few programs going that are assisting. Are you working in tandem with that, like the building of affordable housing and the planning of that? Because I know I'm constantly having to advocate for more affordable housing in our area because we know the gentrification is coming. And unlike what we don't want to happen, what happened in the inner city where they were pushed out and now they're trying to bring them back, which is very expensive. We'd like to keep our there and our community members that have made a place there and work toward having them have the amenities without having to move somewhere. So I'm just worried about the coordination. There's adequate coordination on that anti-displacement.
Thank you for flagging that. Yes, the anti-displacement task force is both there's a city team and a community-wide team, and the Housing Bureau, as well as many of the bureaus that we're presenting today, are involved in that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hardison.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Donnie, for that presentation. I am actually curious if you did not submit a budget request to fund the anti-displacement committee.
Thanks for the question, Commissioner. It will be a part of our spring bump request to add resources to that current grant that I mentioned.
Excellent. That is going to be vital work that must happen. As to Frida's point, that I know the community partners have been kind of overloaded because of COVID, but coming out of COVID, it will be important to have that anti-displacement committee fully funded. And to the point of, I actually just lost my other point. I guess I'm having a senior moment. It'll come back, but thanks, Donnie.
Very good. I don't see any other questions right at the moment. Let's try one more with Director Kennard, see if we got that sound fixed.
All right, can you hear me now?
Oh, that's beautiful. What did you do?
I tried a headset again. Third time's the charm, apparently.
Yeah, that made all the difference in the world right there.
All right, so thank you, everybody, and a special thanks to all the presenters today. I know that I kept you moving pretty quickly, so thank you for getting through all that really important material. Thanks to all of our participants. We are taking a break from budget presentations for the remainder of the week, and we will be reconvening on Tuesday, next Tuesday, March 30th at 9:30 in the morning. And at that point, we will hear from the Parks Bureau, the Bureau of Transportation, and Office of Community and Civic Life. So I hope everybody has a good rest of your week, and we will see you in 1 week's time.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.